Hey guys, it's Becca. I am really excited to share this project with you today. Last year, I had the opportunity to design visuals for a giant interactive diorama in the brand new Southern Arizona Heritage and Visitor Center in Tucson, Arizona. This project was an absolute dream for me. I love Tucson, and it's a huge honor for me to have my work on display at the new center. I wanted to say thank you to Pima County and to Ralph Appelbaum Associates for working with me on this project. The center is absolutely stunning. It is full of beautiful artifacts and information about the culture and food and art and history of Southern Arizona. All right, let's get down to business. First, I'm going to show you the final art and the final build, and then I will go through the process we went through for designing this piece. The first thing I did when I got this job was I started a sketchbook to study some of the animals that were going to be featured in the diorama. This was totally for my own personal development, and obviously I love to draw animals, so this wasn't part of the contract, this was just for myself. But it was a really great opportunity to try out different styles, different materials, and I actually did end up using some of these drawings as reference for the diorama designs. In terms of style, I presented the client with 3 different directions that I thought would work well for the diorama. The first is mostly in line with what I do now. It's the style I'm most comfortable with. Very geometric, very stylized, flat, sort of 1950s style. The second has more of a hand-drawn look, and the third is definitely the largest departure from my regular style. It's more textured, it's more realistic, and in the end they ended up going with a third option because they wanted everything to look as recognizable as possible. The technical specifications of this project meant that we had to be very creative about the layout and the design. There were different constraints about the size of each panel, how and where they were connected, how many you could put on each row, where the seams were in the different background panels, how the lighting panels were going to be set up. It was a lot of things to keep in mind, but luckily RAA was so helpful and so professional, and they really kept me on track with some of the technical challenges. Using the vector silhouettes that RAA provided me in their original mock-up, I started to work through how I could make the most compelling composition given the technical restraints. The main thing I was thinking about was how I could use the vertical space of the diorama to give each animal enough space and enough room to breathe. Once I got that figured out, the next step was doing a tight sketch of the approved layout. This was the final stage before I started rendering everything, which was very time intensive, so I wanted to make sure that I got feedback on all the details to make sure that all the plants and the animals and the geography were recognizable and anatomically accurate. I did 2 very rough color concepts, one in a really warm kind of orangey palette and the second in a cool, more high contrast palette. And the final and most time-intensive step was to color and render each of the panels. I'm actually a little embarrassed to show these because the first few versions are so messy and so inconsistent. There was definitely a few points here where I started to lose confidence, but luckily I had no choice but to persevere, and slowly it did come together. Oh my gosh, I learned so much from this project. The biggest ongoing challenge was actually not anything to do with the illustration itself, but the file handling. Because these are huge illustrations, some are 9 feet tall, they're huge. The files are giant. So I had to work on each panel individually, and it was really tricky to make sure that the colors were consistent, that the line weights were consistent, so that when everything was put together, that it all looked like the same piece and that it all had a visual consistency. This was definitely the most ambitious project that I've taken on in terms of technical illustration. Usually for my client work, I tend to work in a very simple, flat style, and these illustrations are obviously much more realistic. But I'm super excited about this direction, and I am so grateful for having had the opportunity to kind of push myself and see where I can take my work. Big thanks again to Pima County and Ralph Appelbaum Associates for working with me on this. It was an absolute pleasure. If anybody has any questions, please leave them in the comments, and I will see you guys next time.